I built some stuff out and I got to test the workflow trigger, the new Playbooks workflow trigger too.
There is a Playbooks workflow trigger. That is exciting.
Yeah. Yep.
Welcome everybody to Let's Build Your Playbooks with Madelyn, Donovan, a new series that is starting up to focus on one of the most, valuable tools, maybe one of the most misunderstood tools in the HubSpot ecosystem right now. How you doing, Madelyn?
Good. How about you?
Doing awesome. Excited to talk about this topic. We had a pretty good session, a couple of weeks ago. Going to be here weekly. As we dive in, why are you so passionate about the topic of playbooks?
I was thinking this morning as I was preparing um, about like all the, what playbooks means traditionally and like, obviously all the sport connotations and how I'm the least sporty person known to mankind. So it's kind of ironic. Um,
You
but
picked a good icon, at least.
yeah, exactly. I think that's probably what made me think of it. But playbooks are like the best way to really keep your team aligned and align your automation processes, but also just your, human processes, things that you can't automate, and kind of keep it all wrapped up as nicely as you can so that everyone, no matter how they think or communicate, everyone has the same single source of truth.
Love it. And you've got some specific examples today as we talk about, one of the reasons that tools like this maybe don't get adopted or are underutilized or misused is that there is often a change management component to some process that's happening. And that quote that I led with in the post, like I've heard it like at least 10 times. Like as soon as you say playbook, especially to a sales team or a sales leader, they hear script. Why is this not a script?
It should enhance your process, not replace it. And it shouldn't add to your workload in an ideal world. It should honestly, hopefully reduce it, but like optimize your existing process or even help guide if you're lacking a process. It helps you build it as you see what you're missing. Um, yeah, so a playbook shouldn't be like you said in your post. It should you shouldn't think that you're going to be a robot using it. It's more a tool to help you make sure that obviously you're getting the information that you need from your lead or your client or whoever you're speaking with, but also making sure that you feel good about the job that you're doing. For me, I'm an overthinker. I'm always like, is this good enough? Did I actually fulfill the needs of this project? Am I done? Can I stop thinking about this? So a playbook is not only like talking points that can help you with your call, it's also a way, like it's a checkbox. It's like, did I do the things that I needed to in order to say like I'm done with this right now?
Yes. And, something that comes to mind is when you approach a sales team about process. And generally, if we're at the point where we're able to influence, process by, HubSpot, by using HubSpot tools, there's at least one person on the team that's been very successful and has put the company in a great position, which means they have a great sales process, whether it's documented or not. They know what works. And I'll say it like, maybe it's not so bad to get close to being a robot if you know the exact steps required to hit those 80%, 90% close rates that I usually hear about, from these successful salespeople, that they'll say something like, well, as soon as we get in the conversation, we win these deals. So it's not that we're trying to replace that. We're trying to understand that and standardize it across the team without creating robotic feels. But if we know what works, why wouldn't we do our best to do that every single time?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially like like you said, if there are those people in the organization that know what works, if you're scaling, if you're growing, there's always going to be new team members too. So helping them fall into the processes that have worked for you is a great way to use playbooks too. Like maybe you build the robot. You don't have to follow the robot. Maybe you are the robot already, and give your robot skills to the next team member and clone yourself, essentially. Not really, but
Yes. Well, no, it's a good point. Like, how often does it, like, whether it's a leader or it's just an individual business owner that's been great at sales, and they always get to the point where, like, how do I scale myself?
right. Yeah.
This is how,
Yep.
right? Like, you have to find ways like this. And what this does is, when you challenge yourself to do this, right, you start to find things that are repetitive, are a little administrative, bring those out into the system, let it do it for you. Now you have even more time and more ability to actually scale yourself. You have more time to be yourself and provide the value that you can on a daily basis, while also onboarding others onto the team so that they're saying the same things in their way, and there's a piece of you happening during that process. And this is that step you need to take, is understand that this is not about becoming robotic scripts, creating this inflexibility in the system. This is about scalability and expanding everything that works across, wherever you want it to go, across the buying process, the sales process, the customer lifecycle. So I know you got some examples, prepped. So what do you say we dive in?
Yeah, sure.
And if anybody happens to be commenting, I haven't figured out how to see comments on Riverside yet. So I'll just say thank you for watching, and I'll figure out how to get better at responding to that stuff.
Nice. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out too. Yeah, so I decided to create a playbook on Playbooks and use it to kind of like test out a lot of the features, or like just kind of insert a lot of the features so that you can see them at a glance. I also I wanted to take a look at all of the playbook updates that have happened over the past year, I guess. Um, Mostly because of this workflow update that was really exciting. Um, but first, let's start with like how you can make playbooks work for your team without your team hating you or hating the playbook. And I think it's important to keep in mind that there are things that need to happen within the playbook as you're building it, as you like roll it out, but then also what happens after the playbook is submitted, outside of the playbook, where the data goes, um, how it's stored, how you make sure that your team knows where to access it, who can access it, because playbooks are only available with a sales seat, I believe. Um, so there's lots of things to think about. But yeah, so within the playbook itself, um, there's a lot. Um, Obviously, like we said 2 weeks ago, like there's all of the properties. So whenever you're asking a question to your team, it's really important, I believe, to select update a property. So what did I do? I think I created favorite color. Oh. And then after you select a property that you want submitted and say what the question is that you're asking, I personally think that it's really important to hide this notes field unless you have like a really specific exception or a good reason. Um, and the reason behind that is, like I said, if only certain people on your team can access the playbook, or if you don't want everyone to have to go reference a note or an activity, property on the contact record, And if you want all of the data to be in the same place, filterable, accessed in reports and things like that, you don't want it in a note. You want it in the property itself. So getting rid of the notes field there so that the sales team or whichever team is using a playbook doesn't have the ability to put it there and to lose it, you're helping them already. Like making things easy from the get-go a lot of the time means just like building it where you can't mess it up. Like only making it possible to do it one way, to do it the right way as much as possible.
Right. Yeah, that would be like, unless there's a very clear way or very clear training and people understand exactly what goes in the notes and not in the notes.
Yeah.
Because what comes to mind, I remember when I'm pretty sure there was a time where like it felt laborious when you felt like you had to like add an open text, field after every question because there was some kind of commentary, you wanted to add. So that's where it's understanding this process, and the difference between one person doing it and 10 people is that when you are in the one person situation, it you know might be a way to say, hey, this is the data that I want to track specifically. But if I know that when I ask them what their favorite color is, that I'm going to follow up with some kind of story, like asking why, or I know they're going to give me a story as to why that's their favorite color, that's where it's like a subjective judgment call of whether or not I want to use that information later. So maybe I put it in, maybe I don't. But that's where, you might add stuff that uh, adds color, if you will, to the record, right? So
Yeah.
interesting that they leave it checked as default.
I know. I think so
Uh,
too. Yeah.
it's probably, this is where like often these tools get made for a specific purpose. Um, and that purpose, like, it becomes very made to order, and that purpose might have required notes. Also there's flexibility that they want to provide in using the system, but that's the flexibility that leads to people using it in all kinds of different ways. So I think I agree with you in that it makes sense to kind of leave that unchecked, um, as you're trying to create, integrity throughout the usage of these playbooks.
That's a great point, though. That's typically what I've chosen to do is, um, I think if I were to fill out this playbook, I think I created an other value and then used conditional logics. That's what I always do. Is like if other is the value, then another field pops up and it's a text field and you can fill in whatever you want. Um, but maybe you don't
Yes.
want to do that. Maybe you don't want to have to create an other field for like essentially a second property for 50 properties that you need in your system. Maybe you don't want to do that. So having the notes there and using it that way could actually be a great strategy. But you're right, the team would just need trained on that, and like that's where communication comes into play. And then that made me think too, when it comes to change management and rolling out something like this, I think you have to keep training in mind, not just the first time, but like over time. So what happened? Sure, you're going to give a great training session the first time that you roll out a new playbook. Everybody's going to say they get it. They're going to like be excited about it for a week or whatever. 3 months after, or maybe they haven't had to use it as much as you thought, or whatever situation. Later down the line, they might forget, or they might not do it consistently. um, you might get a bunch of questions like asking you to remind them how it's supposed to be done. Um, and that can be where double work does come in too. So the playbook isn't supposed to add more work to their plate, but what if remembering how to use it is more work?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the invisible labor like idea. Like you're still kind of like taking up useful energy by like having to remember all of this stuff and kind of like subconsciously stressing out about it. Um, so like that's important to keep in mind too. So like this, you don't really have to remember how to use because you can only use it one way. This, we could maybe add a note saying like if the color isn't listed, please use the notes field. It will be available in the uh, meeting notes after your playbook is submitted. That way, you get ahead of any questions about how to use it, and you know that your team will still know how to use the playbook properly without having to reference like another piece of information.
Yeah. I think that's so key. Like, because when we want to provide, you know, tools like this without creating too much structure around, and process around what the team is doing, it's important to find a cadence of review, like with the team. And if you're marketing or any kind of ops, rev ops, and you want to support the sales team, you must find a way for regular review sessions. And this is often when you have help from leadership and we talk about sales and marketing alignment and these meetings that should just have all the customer facing team in them, it creates the space for that so that you're not the only one just asking for feedback. But if you don't have that, finding ways to say, hey, especially in the case of other, there has to be some kind of regular review to say, okay, we've got 10 other responses this month. 8 of them were this. Should we add that option, to the drop down? And, starting to create that kind of feedback loop with your internal teams becomes so important if you want the flexibility, built into the process. Otherwise, you start to get that creep of too much flexibility. Data is in multiple places. Now it's not serving them. Then they stop using it. And that cycle is, something we want to avoid.
Yeah, and you want them to trust this process. You want to like build on their belief that this is improving things. It should be. So, yeah, I totally agree. Cool. So let's go over um, maybe let's talk about so what to require in a playbook um, and how to determine that. I think it's really important to not bog down your team with too many entries. But I've also had situations where a team has information and they want to be able to put it in this playbook. They don't want to have to go somewhere else. Maybe they filled out all of the information that all of the questions that were asked, but they still have a ton more technical details. Um, and they don't want to do double work. They just want to put it here while they're still in this mode. They're getting their tasks done, and they want it to all be in the same place. I think it's great to do a mix of required fields and non-required fields. So um, let's say maybe we do make favorite color required. Um, but maybe when you ask someone their favorite color, they also say, well, I really like if I had to choose, I would choose yellow, but I also like blue. Okay, maybe you want to add that in since you know it. Um, I also have a property called second favorite color.
Going
So,
deep here.
yeah.
And this is like, if
Yeah.
you're responsible for creating this playbook and you were never on the team that it's about to support, please do not do this in a vacuum. Like, you cannot build this properly without talking to them. And they know what works. So if you don't have a culture of every call is recording and you have access to it, everything's in the CRM, just start by asking the team, like, what information do they need to know every time, um, and dig there, like including like, hey, we have this call. Then I always have to follow up with an email asking this question because it doesn't make sense to, you know, answer them in the moment of the call or something like that. They have all this information in their heads and in their email inboxes and in their CRM records. It's your job to get it out of there and into, you know, tools like this.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So it's like so key to have a good communication routine, communication channel with the teams that you're trying to serve with this. Um, and adding flexibility, like just a, you know, normal anything else kind of field. Um, I probably would do this as a property, but I don't know that I have one created right now. Um, but having that so that they can, if there are any questions that you haven't thought of right now, that doesn't mean you can't a few months from now sort through that and, like you said, do that kind of um, like validation process to see, like, okay, are these standard enough things that we should create properties for them so that we can use them more efficiently. um, so
Yeah.
that's a great way to do that. You don't know what you don't know, so
Yeah.
they know, and you can look for trends later.
Right. And seeing these is not very much not in stone tools that are going to evolve, you know, as your team uses them. Because it's totally okay to say, hey, when we first started talking about this, we added this question. We're not, it's not in any reports. We're not, you know, using it to automate anything. You guys aren't filling it in, you know, whatever reason, it looks like it's not being used. Should we take it off?
Yeah,
Finding moments like that helps with overall adoption because when you create the habits of like, I'm skipping over this thing every time,
yeah,
that means I can skip over other things every time. And we
yeah,
want to try and reduce that any kind of noise on the screen that they might automatically discount, right? It's almost like it's like a hidden credibility hit to the system that you're asking,
yeah,
you know, people to
yeah,
use.
absolutely. And like, again, kind of trying to build trust over time with your team. It's not just a proactive, you know, obviously you should be proactive about it. That's the way you get these tools and things like that. But like you just described, if you notice that they're not using a certain property, maybe ask them, like, and be very careful to not be accusatory and show them, like, I try to always take the approach of like, I'm going to assume that this is annoying. I'm going to assume that whatever process I build, I'm on your side. Like, I don't do your job. I can't do your job. I want to make this as easy as possible. So, can you be honest with me and like give me any honest feedback? Like, you will not offend me if you're not doing it. If you think it's annoying, please tell me. So, like, if you see that they're not using a property, don't go up to them and be like, "Why aren't you using the property? You're supposed to be using the property. I told you." That's the only way this is gonna work is if you use the property. Um, that's not the way. Like, obviously, they're not using it for a reason. Um, maybe it doesn't need to be used, or you know, maybe it's a higher level up. Maybe it's not their problem. Maybe it's their, you know, their managers and prioritizing it, or maybe it needs to be required if it really is important. So many things. So
Yeah. And when you come at it like that, you create this like adversarial
exact.
relationship.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get the actual reasons why they're
Yeah.
not using it after that. So that's where it's, you got to create this team like collaborative spirit saying, hey, like, you're not using this, you know, usually trying to connect it to some previous commitment that was made to use it either as a team. Uh, I understand we're not using it now. And just like, if you can tell me why, and you just be very surprised at like, you might have trained it a couple times, but the next 10 deals, they didn't have to use that piece. And
Yeah.
now in the 11th deal, they don't remember the training because they're not hitting it every day, or they don't remember to look in the certain place. So the amount of times you get like, I forgot I was supposed to do this, or I forgot, or like I didn't see it on the screen. The options didn't make sense to me. There's a very similarly named property over here, and I've been filling that out instead. Like, we make these assumptions about training that if we tell them one time in a vacuum setting that doesn't include like them going through the motions, that they're just going to get it. And that's very much not the case. Playbooks specifically help bridge some of those gaps so that you can build a lot of instructions into these as well. Um, and that's where like you can create this kind of, stickiness, if you will. Like, if they know that they're going to click on the playbook and be reminded about everything that they're supposed to know, like that's another way to leverage, and create usability of this tool, is by taking it beyond just, here's 10 fields that need to be filled out every time because your sales manager wants to know BANT before you can move forward,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that exactly. Making it easy for them to continue learning or continue optimizing whatever it is you're doing. If it's all in one place and if it's not hindering the existing process, like maybe they don't even realize that it's happening, but it's influencing the process for good.
All right.
Um,
And connecting it to pains other places in the platform. Like, if you want this thing to happen, then what if we put it here? Just coming at it from perspective of, how do we make this valuable for you as the user? And it can be hard as an admin sometimes, but you have to assume positive intent,
yes,
that there is some decent human reason why
yes,
this thing isn't happening, or why they're choosing to do something else in support of the goals that their boss is worried about.
and maybe they found a better way. Honestly, maybe they found a better way, and it like you can adapt. You can change the process to fit their way.
Yeah, there's almost always something to be learned, either from how users are using the system, or how managers are asking them questions that don't relate to what is supposed to be happening in the system. Like, when you find, one of the biggest challenges is when you don't have sales leadership, understanding the value of things like this, and they want the team to just have like a monthly call where it's just a conversation, and the sales leader brings a spreadsheet, and they're filling in a spreadsheet, and then they're creating PowerPoint slides because that's the way that they've been reporting forever. All of that stuff goes against the usability of the system. And usually that's where you try to create this safe space to say, well, my boss has asked me for this, and, this playbook doesn't help me do that. And it's like, okay, now we know which conversation to
Right,
have, right?
right. Yep.
Like, it doesn't matter how great the playbook is. If it doesn't support that, they're not using it.
Yeah, and um, I'm probably going on a little bit of a tangent here, but that makes me think too. I am really big on um, you shouldn't expect other team members to be as passionate about process improvement as you are. It would be great if everyone was, but honestly, the world would probably honestly not get that much done because there wouldn't be anybody actually doing things. Um, but people just want to do their jobs sometimes like, and that's okay, that's normal. Like of course there's a good portion of people who like are overachievers and like want to go above and beyond. They want to find process improvements, they want to grow. I would like guess that that's most of the people on LinkedIn are more in that camp, but there's a lot of people who just want to do their job and check all the boxes and go home, and that's okay too. um, so I think it's important to build processes with that in mind. Like, this should be able to be accomplished by both camps of people. You should have that feedback channel, but like if something's required, you need to make it required. Like it needs to be super clear because if it's a part of their job, then they'll get it done. But if it's not a part of their job, you can't expect them to do it. You can't get mad at them after. It's just a bonus. So
Right. Now, this is another place where you have to answer the question, what's in it for me? Like, what's in it for me to complete this playbook? And it could
mhm.
be a wide range of things, including what you just mentioned. Like, if you get this stuff done, there's less admin you have to do at the end of the day to clean up, and you can go spend time with family, hit the golf course, whatever you want to do, outside of work, while also knowing that you're not going to come back the next day, have somebody, getting in your stuff about why this thing isn't done. Right. So there's
PPS
lots,
PPS reports or whatever it is.
right. Yeah. No cover sheets. Um, exactly. So and everybody's different, and, some are motivated by the commission check. Some are not, some have managers. Like,
Yeah.
this is why, like, whether you like it or not, when you sign up to do this stuff, specifically RevOps, there's way more, interpersonal communication, learning that you have to do. Uh, so when you see courses in the HubSpot Academy about, uh, like critical thinking in an ever changing world, like this is why they exist,
Yeah.
because we've got all this stuff to manage. And if we're just throwing extra tools and they don't understand what's in it for them, they're just not using it.
Yeah.
Right. They've already built a process, whether it's documented or not, that works for them. Any change represents uncertainty until you make it certain. Right. And HubSpot happens to be one of the easiest tools to get to that certainty. But when it doesn't align with what they need to be certain about, then you're not doing anybody, any favors.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think this was a great, you know, it's so easy to just like, hey, here's a sales, BAMP playbook, and this is how we built it, and this is how easy it. Like, we can't even get there unless we're addressing, some of these building blocks and understanding the value of these, understanding how to manage users and get adoption. Like, no matter how great HubSpot is, the best CRM is the one that gets used.
Yeah.
This is a tool that helps with that. It's supposed to help with that. It can very easily get in the way of that. If the admin is over here in the corner, just building all the playbooks and all the structure, and then they throw it at sales or service to go follow these rules because the boss said so, right? Uh, that's not going to get the adoption you want. Um,
Yeah.
so if you can think about these playbooks specifically, we're going to keep hitting on this topic and constantly be talking about the people involved and who are we trying to help. It's funny how all this relates to, marketing and business in general. Like, you got to know your audience, you've got
Yeah.
to know the problem you're trying to solve, and you got to be able to tell them how you're going to solve the
Yes.
problem. Almost every That could apply to almost every tool in the HubSpot platform.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's what I love about like marketing operations and RevOps in general is like, sure, it's external marketing, but like so much is internal marketing that people don't think of. It really is. So
yes,
this is a great
internal
example.
customers abound.
Yeah.
If it wasn't so awkward to always say like internal/external
I
customers,
know. I know.
right? I'd just use the word customer. Everybody would know that means basically every human being around you
Yeah.
is a customer.
Yeah.
Life would be easier. But until then, we will start, we will keep, fighting the good fight over here. Really excited to get this series going, and continue, with you. I think we had a great conversation today.
Yeah.
What's one takeaway, from this conversation today? If you can,
Say ask ask question, like ask your team things, don't tell them. You're not like an order giver. Like I, I joked in my LinkedIn post that I'm a rule follower because I like, I like knowing that I did the thing, that it's like a binary, like I either did it or I didn't. Um, but that doesn't mean everybody's like that. So especially when you're building out things like this, it's really important to just like keep everybody's work styles in mind. And the goal is alignment. Like there are so many different work personalities and like work styles, communication styles, and you're creating one thing. Like that is hard. So like, treat it like a living document, ask questions, don't don't assume the worst. Like always assume positive intent, like you said. Um, yeah, I don't know if that was one takeaway, but
No, it's good. Ask people.
yeah,
Don't tell them, and you will get a lot farther in your journey to user adoption and adoption of playbooks that are supposed to work for them. So well said. Great conversation today. And as you think about your processes, as you try to scale, your team and the stuff that works, take a look at playbooks and find the opportunity and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.